With the summer finished and the pre-season games done and dusted, we are just less than 1 week away from the official start of the 2023 AFL Premiership season, with 18 teams restarting once again for another shot at the greatest trophy this country has to offer. But which of those teams will rise to the occasion and which will fall? And which players are ready to make an impact on the AFL? This is my 2023 AFL predictions. To make things a little bit more interesting than last time, we're going to start with the player awards, move on to the top 8, and then finish off with the team I think will win the premiership. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Kicking off with the NAB Rising Star Award, and I've selected Finn Callaghan from GWS. The Giants are in this weird position where they look to start a rebuild after dropping Leon Cameron as coach and bringing in Richmond assistant coach Adam Kingsley to lead the way. They have an extremely healthy group of young guys like Lockie Whitfield, Tom Green, All-Australian Sam Taylor, Leika Lear, Corey Iden, as well as last year's pick number 1, Aaron Cadman, who I also heavily considered for this award alongside West Coast's Ruin Gimby. The departures of Jacob Hopper, Tim Taranto, as well as young gun Tanner Bruin means the Giants have a massive midfield hold waiting to be taken. And with a talented youngster who was selected at pick 3 with exceptional contested work and efficient kicking, means the Giants have an absolute gun waiting to be unleashed in the AFL. Next up, we have the surprise All-Australian, and I've picked a man who has been tormented by injury for the past few seasons, and after a good pre-season in a different position, looks primed for a massive year. Fremantle's former captain, Nat Fyfe. After an injury-ruined 2022 season that was combined with the mass success of his team, Fyfe made the call in late February to step down as the Dockers skipper after 5 years to work on his craft as a forward. And after his outstanding pre-season performances, kicking 6 goals in both matches, as well as kicking another 3 in Fremantle's intra-club game, Fyfe looks arguably in the best shape of his life, which is saying a lot. The Dockers have been lacking a consistent goal-kicking key forward ever since the Big Pav hung up the boots in 2016, so there is a massive opportunity for anyone who can take it, and after a crucial pre-season, Nat Fyfe looks to be that guy. But the big question for him is that can he remain uninjured for the season? And if he can, he could very easily kick above 40 goals and earn his 4th All-Australian jumper as a forward. Coming up next is who I think will be the best trade recruit, and I've picked Daniel McStay from the Pies. After being in and out from the Lions 22 thanks to Joe Danaher and Eric Hipwood, Dan McStay has the opportunity to be the Pies' number 1 key forward and establish himself as one of the league's better key forwards. Similar to how Peter Wright went to Essendon and established himself around the competition, and with the Pies' fast ball movement, which will allow for more scoring opportunities, means McStay is more likely to get more shots at goal than ever before. Typically, the best trade recruit mantle goes to a player whose team is at the top end of the competition. Think Tyson Stengel and Will Brodie last year. I also heavily considered Isaac Rankin, Brodie Grundy, Jack Gunston, and Leon Jones, which you can make the argument isn't even a trade recruit, but I digress. With the opportunities that he's going to get, since Collingwood haven't had a consistent goal-kicking forward ever since Travis Cloke, means that McStay has the potential to be one of the biggest bargains of all time for Collingwood. Up next is the Coleman Medal, and I've ended up picking the same man I did for this award as I did this time last year. I've got Jeremy Cameron from the Cats. Despite finishing second for the Coleman, just falling short of Carlton's Charlie Curnow, Jezza was by far the best forward in the competition and arguably the best player in the game. Kicking 65 goals total for the season, consistently putting on game-winning performances, and his ball use is simply incredible. The way he sets up his fellow teammates and just seems to always make the right decision is just something a key forward shouldn't be capable of. But here we are. And honestly, there's no reason why Jeremy Cameron shouldn't win the Coleman. He's playing with the best team in the competition, one that has somehow gotten better since their last official AFL match, and it helps that his partner in crime Tom Hawkins has been rattled by injury in the off-season, which will allow Cameron to get more opportunities at goal and likely win his 2nd Coleman medal. Lastly, on the player awards, we have the Brownlow medal, and I've selected TOUK Miller from the Gold Coast Suns. The Brownlow medal could honestly come down to one of 6 men. consisting of the current Brownlow medalist Patrick Cripps, Lachie Neale, Andrew Brayshaw, Clayton Oliver, Christian Petrarca, and of course TOUK Miller. I just think with the Suns set to rise up the ladder, which I'll get to shortly, TOUK Miller will lead the way as he enters the prime of his career, capped off by winning his first Brownlow medal in 2023. Moving on to the ladder, and at the very bottom in 18th spot, I have tipped Hawthorn to win the wooden spoon. I had Hawthorn in this spot this time last year, and to my surprise, they ended up finishing 13th, which is very impressive considering just how competitive they were. However, I am far more confident placing the Hawks here than I was last year, off the back of Hawthorn losing 5 out of 6 players from the leadership group, with 4 ending up in new clubs. And with the Hawks starting to fill up their list with promising youngsters, means Hawthorn will likely take the first step to committing to a full rebuild under Sam Mitchell. Next up in 17th spot, I have got Alistair Clarkson's Kangaroos. After earning consecutive wooden spoons in the past few seasons, I have North Melbourne only moving up 1 spot in the ladder after a nightmare of a year in 2022. With the recruitment of Alistair Clarkson, which is already setting an obvious amount of excitement for shin boners, I think people need to understand that although Clarko is an incredible coach and I'm not taking anything away from him, North are not going to be a premiership team instantly. There's still going to be some tough times because at the end of the day, they are still at the first line of their rebuild. And although this may sound harsh, North haven't progressed on the field at all since Brad Scott was sacked. However, having a strong head like Alistair Clarkson at the club means that finally North fans can start to imagine what the light at the end of the tunnel will look like. However, they still need to venture through that tunnel. So even though there are still going to be some heavy losses throughout the season, hopefully it'll all be worth it for North fans. Speaking of Brad Scott, in 16th spot I have the Essendon Bombers. Last year I predicted Essendon to finish 5th on the ladder. The less said about that the better. I'm still not confident in placing the Dons here, since in recent history they've had this weird phase of rising up into the 8 one year to only then fall out the next year, and then the cycle repeats itself and you've basically summarised the Bombers for the last 9 years. So with that being said, shouldn't the Bombers rise up back to the ladder in 2023 then? Well, no. They can. I mean, they've still got that group that did take them to the finals in 2021, but it just depends on whether those players in Darcy Parish, Jack Stringer, Zach Merritt, Peter Wright, and Nick Hind can play the level of footy that brought them to the finals in the first place. However, after a lackluster pre-season, I seriously doubt the Bombers can pull off a finals comeback, but I wouldn't label the idea as impossible. Next up in 15th, I have the West Coast Eagles. As I said in my 2022 reaction video, 2022 was one lived in hell by the West Coast Eagles, as they suffered through their worst season in their nearly 40-year history. The Eagles struggled as a result of their inability to keep players on the field, having one of the biggest injury lists in the league for the second year in a row. There wasn't a single player on the list who had been in each and every match for the team in 2022, with most of their players absent due to physical injuries or health and safety regulations. With the Eagles ranked 17th for points per game and losing the club's all-time goal kicker Josh Kennedy, who kicked 37 goals himself for that season, means that West Coast have a massive key forward hole in their team. However, with that being said, I do believe West Coast will have a much better season than they did last year. With JK gone and a healthy Oscar Allen set to return, now is the perfect time to use Oscar's talents in the forward line. With youngsters like Chamble Chesser, Jai Cully, Ruben Ginbey and Elijah Hewitt set to make a senior impact. As well as the Eagles looking far more healthier and fitter as the season approaches, makes me believe that although they'll be a bottom side once again, they will be far better than the side that played in 2022. In 14th spot on the ladder, I have GWS. Like I said earlier, the Giants are in this weird spot where they're looking to start a rebuild after sacking their coach. But when you stop and look at the Giants list and what they have available, there is a lot of talent there that's just waiting to be used. You've got the experienced bodies in Phil Davis, Nick Haynes, Stephen Coniglio, the new appointed captain Toby Green, Callan Ward, Josh Kelly, Jesse Hogan, the list just goes on and on. but they also have a healthy group of young players that I talked about earlier. Tom Green, All-Australian Sam Taylor, Lachie Whitfield, Finn Callaghan, Aaron Cadman, Lee Leah, and more. So even despite their poor performances last year, if all the stars align and the Giants' experienced players can get themselves right, I have full confidence that the Giants can shoot up the ladder. If I had to pick any team that could come close to replicating what Collingwood did in 2022, I would back GWS, since there is clearly a huge amount of talent on that list that's just waiting to be assembled by the right coach. However, instead of being unrealistic like I did last year when I tipped GWS to finish 4th, I'm going to go with my head and tip the Giants to just finish outside the bottom 4. Next up in 13th spot, I have the Saints. Honestly, from this point on, deciding which teams are going to finish in what order is so difficult because I feel like off the back of the trade period, all the teams around this margin have just gotten so even. Except for one side, but I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But all the teams that were in the finals conversation last year but didn't make it have all improved in some way, while most of the teams that did make finals have stepped back in some shape. Because of that, I feel like the top 8 is going to be so close that there are going to be some teams that most people would consider a finals contender but can't make it since there are just so many teams who are just slightly better. This is how I feel about not just St Kilda, but basically every team from this point on until we get to about 5th or 6th. I could seriously name 13 sides that all have the right case for playing finals. However, out of all of those teams, I feel like St Kilda are just the weakest out of them all. It doesn't help when majority of your most important players are set to miss a major part of the season. And although they do have Ross the Boss back in the box, I feel like this list, especially when compared to the other teams I've put above them, the Saints just don't have enough firepower out there at the moment to make a push into September. I do believe they'll be a far better side than we saw last year, but as I keep saying, there are just so many far better sides in the competition at the moment that it's really hard to make a case on the Saints for playing finals in 2023. Coming in 12th spot, I have Port Adelaide. This may come as a bit of a surprise considering just how much better they've gotten during the off-season, recruiting guys like Jason Horne-Francis and Junior Rioli, as well as their list already having supreme guns like Zach Butters, Fine Wine Travis Boak, Ollie Wines, Georgiades, Alia, and Charlie Dixon. So why do I have them finishing so far below out of the top 8? Well, this is more of a personal opinion of mine, but I just don't think Ken Hinkley is the guy to take this Ports team to the promised land. Honestly, that might come back to bite me, but after seeing just how poor they were in the preseason, it looks like they haven't changed at all since their 0-5 start in 2022. Now, I'm not saying that Port Adelaide are a bad team. Honestly, I think they have one of the best lists going around in the game right now. But I don't think Hinkley's slow, methodical approach benefits this team at all. So unless they can start playing like the fierce side that they were at the start of the decade, I don't see them going very far from last year. Now coming up in 11th, and to annoy Port fans even more, I have the Adelaide Crows. Weirdly enough, this may come as a surprise because of the amount of people that have Adelaide inside their top 8. And that's pretty easy to understand, seeing just how exciting their forward line looks after recruiting Isaac Rankin to now play alongside guys like Shane McAdam, Darcy Fogarty, Josh Rochelle, Riley Philthorpe, and Taylor Walker. But their main problem, and the reason I can't see the Crows making finals this year, is from the other side of the ground, their back 6. This is a new unwritten rule in the game of AFL, but if you want to be a premiership side, let alone a finals contender, you need to have at least a decent back 6. 6 out of the 8 teams that did play finals in 2022 had been ranked inside the top 8 for the best defensive sides. Adelaide are just a team that is way too easy to score against, so although it's helpful to have some excellent goal kickers on one end, what's the point if the opposition is guaranteed to kick more goals than you regardless of talent because your back 6 is so unimpressive? So unless the Crows can get their back 6 sorted and everyone there has a breakout season, I don't see the Crows making it inside the top 8. But I do see the Crows becoming one of the most exciting teams to watch in the competition and in recent years. Next up in 10th spot, I have the Gold Coast Suns. Another team that the AFL public think have the potential to shoot up in the finals and play in September for the first time in their club's history. And although I think we would all love to see the Suns finally achieve success in their AFL lifetime, I think once again it all boils down to having the right list at the wrong time. Because to their misfortunes, the teams surrounding the Suns have just improved so dramatically since 2022 that as much as I love the Suns in their list, I can't see them beating those sides and finishing inside the top 8 for 2023. Next up in 9th and the last spot outside the top 8, I have the Sydney Swans. The Sydney Swans have arguably the most balanced list in the competition. They have the McCartan brothers, Dane Rampage and Nick Blakey controlling the backline, Chad Warner, Errol Gordon and Luke Parker in the midfield, and in the forward line a fit in firing Lance Franklin, Logan McDonald and Top Pat at ground level. So with so much talent scattered across this list, why the hell do I have Sydney finishing outside of the top 8? Because even in the AFL, history will repeat itself. The 2017 Crows had one of the most impressive home and away records in recent memory, but were then smashed in the grand final by the Banana Jumper Tigers, and nearly 6 years later have even yet to make a finals appearance. The 2019 Giants were beaten to a pulp by Richmond, and even if they failed to make the finals the year after, they did redeem themselves in 2021. The 2021 Bulldogs team suffered a 74-point loss to the D's, who broke a 57 premiership drought, and even if the Dogs just barely made the finals, it was thanks to an all-time choke by Carlton. And this doesn't just include grand finals either. Port Adelaide was smashed in the 2020 prelim by 71 points, and it was thanks to that result that I successfully predicted that Port would miss the 2022 final series. So even if I do agree the Swans have one of the most talented lists in the competition, AFL history says that they shouldn't play finals after being smashed in the grand final last year. And that is why I have the Swans missing out on the top 8. Kicking off the top 8, I have the Western Bulldogs. I have the Doggies finishing in the same spot as I did last year. However, the story this time around will be a far different one than the Dogs. However, the story this time around will be far different, with the Dogs battling inside the top 8 for the majority of the season. The combination of Norton, Lobb, Jamari Ugle-Hagan, Sam Darcy, a returning Liam Jones and Tim English are set to set some massive headaches for opposition coaches. Although they did lose their best and fairest winner Josh Dunkley to the Lions and Lockie Hunter to the D's, they have such a strong core of midfielders that although it'll hurt fans to see them achieving great things at other clubs, it won't hold them back too far significantly. If Bontempelli can get his body right and their stars start to shine, the Doggies should be a tough side for any opponent. And if the stars align, could see them pushing for another crack at a flag. However, outside of Liam Jones, who is capable of being a star defender, and Bailey Dale, an All-Australian regular, the Dogs lack serious talent in the defensive part of the ground, which is why I have them so low in the top 8. They were ranked 14th for opposition scores per inside 50, only in front of Essendon, the Suns, West Coast and North Melbourne in this category. The recruitment of Rory Lobb does suggest Sam Darcy's development as a defender, and if he can work alongside Liam Jones, could see their defense boost up the ranks. However, I do think they need a year to regroup after a busy off-season, and that's why I have them sitting just inside the top 8. Sitting in 7th spot, I have the Blues. 2022 can only be summarised as an absolute roller coaster by Carlton fans. The season did not finish as Carlton had hoped, but the Blues still have a lot of work with going into 2023 and beyond. The main problems for the Blues at the end of last year that led to their infamous top 8 exit was off the back of their back 6 being crippled by injuries, with the likes of Liam Stocker, Zach Williams, Mitch McGovern and Jacob Wittering missing crucial games for the Blues. If they can have a good run with injury, expect the Blues to be another fierce side in the competition. Next up in 6th spot on my AFL ladder, and I have the Collingwood Magpies. Who could have guessed after predicting Collingwood to finish at the bottom end of the ladder last year, 12 months later we would all now have Collingwood sitting at the top end of the ladder. Even after all the trade news surrounding the season, the fairy tale Collingwood side has mostly stayed intact. Brodie Grundy was offloaded to the D's, Jordan De Goey will remain in the black and white, and they've traded for bargain players in Tom Mitchell, Dan McStay, and Bobby Hill. However, similar to how the Bombers fell off in 2022, now that the competition has had an entire off-season to study and pick apart Collingwood's game plan, I think they'll lose more games to the league's more talented and better prepared teams, and fall down the ladder to finish 6th. Regardless, I still expect the Pies to be one of the up-and-coming teams to push into the premiership conversation. Coming in 5th spot, I have the Richmond Tigers. The Yellow and Black had a fantastic 2022 after many speculated their premiership dynasty had come to an end. They entered 2022 having made significant investments in the draft in an effort to enlist the next generation as the impending retirement of long-serving players loomed large. Kane Lambert, Shane Edwards, Jason Castagna, and Josh Caddy all having decided to hang up the boots. The year had its obvious up and downs, especially in the beginning of the year, but when everything came together, the Tigers proved that they could still be one of the best teams in the competition. After a successful trade period, Richmond has filled a crucial gap in the midfield with the arrivals of Jacob Hopper and Tim Taranto, while also maintaining Jack Graham. The club is now ready for life after Cochin and Martin, thanks to 2 young guns who are about to enter their prime. However, even despite such an impressive forward line, the Tigers severely lack in the defensive part of the ground, which they try to make up with their exceptional ball pressure. Richmond were ranked 11th for defense in the competition last year, so a major improvement in that part of the ground is crucial if the Tigers want to charge back into the top 4. With Richmond now possessing one of the league's most damaging midfielders and already having one of the best forward lines in the competition, expect the Tigers dynasty to be well and truly back on in 2023. Now moving on into the top 4 and kicking it off, I have the Fremantle Dockers. Many people have Fremantle dropping outside the top 8 after an extremely impressive season in 2022. After becoming the first team to beat Melbourne, the only team to defeat Geelong at Cardinia Park, and come back from 41 points down in an elimination final. People are pointing their reasoning for the Dockers to drop out of the top 8 is due to the players that they lost in the trade period, which is fairly reasonable at a surface level, but when you stop and actually look at the players the Dockers lost, Fremantle didn't lose anyone that significant. Darcy Tucker, Lloyd Meek and Griffin Logue were all deaf players that left to seek other opportunities elsewhere. Lob Shaw was the club's leading goal kicker in 2022 with 37 goals, but I'm confident that the combined efforts of Nat Fyfe, Josh Tracy, Luke Jackson, Sean Darcy and Jai Amos can easily replace and surpass Lob. The only player I feel will impact the Dockers for the season will be Blake Acres, who had a breakout year and was in All-Australian discussions. The Dockers have the 5th youngest side in the competition, with their prime young guns in Andrew Brayshaw, Will Brodie, Caleb Sarong, Sean Darcy, Luke Jackson, Hayden Young, Jordan Clark, Lockie Shields and Luke Ryan set to start entering their prime with the addition of Nat Fyfe and Walters, who are both still capable of playing good footy. Because of all this promise, I can't realistically see the Dockers moving out of the top 8. They have arguably the best back 6 in the competition, their midfield is outstanding and contains some of the biggest and brightest young talents that the game has to offer, and a fit and firing Nat Fyfe is every chance to win the Coleman. So expect the flag medal dream to well and truly be alive in 2023. Going into 3rd spot, I have the Melbourne Demons. The D's looked to be the competition's top dog in the early parts of 2022. Although it appeared to be heading for a 2nd straight premiership, this isn't how things turned out. With 10 wins and no losses to begin the season, the Demons appeared to be continuing their great play from the previous year. After they lost 3 consecutive games to the Dockers, Swans and Magpies, dropping their record to 10-3, everything swiftly came undone. Even though they regained some of their confidence later in the season, September did not go as planned, and the team's season came to a heartbreaking end when they were eliminated after 2 straight final sets, including losing to a Brisbane side that the D's smashed 3 weeks prior, and at a venue which the Lions had not won a game at since 2014. Josh Shackey, Lockie Hunter and Brodie Grundy have all been traded in, giving the team even more finals experience, particularly Brodie Grundy, who has combined with Max Gawn in the pre-season matches to create one of the scariest duos for any opposition coach. Demons fans should expect their top players, who are either in the peak of their primes or are starting to enter their prime, put their recent finals record behind them and pursue another flag in 2023. Moving on to second spot on the ladder, and I have the Brisbane Lions. After a disappointing home and away season in 2022, the Lions timed their run perfectly in September to win 2 against the odds finals wins that saved the Lions' year from being a complete failure. However, Brisbane will be looking to make another crack at the flag after a superb off-season, recruiting Josh Dunkley, Jack Gunston, and drafted father/son pick Will Ashcroft, who is every chance to win the Rising Star. With the Lions already having one of the league's best forward lines, Josh Dunkley and Jack Gunston will push the Lions even further in 2023. Top 4 should once again be considered the minimum goal for the Lions to give themselves another opportunity to pursue a premiership. Finally, at the top of the table, I have the Geelong Cats. So you know how I was going on earlier about how even the competition is and how basically 13 teams have a chance to finish inside the top 8? Well, there is one team that is so far in front of everyone else that it's actually unfair for the rest of the competition. Not only were the Cats clearly the best team of 2022, capped off by winning a premiership in one of the most dominant finals campaigns seen in recent memory, the only significant player that the Cats lost for the entire off-season was Joel Selwood, who got a fairy tale ending that only so few athletes have ever had. They have arguably the best 2 key forwards in the competition in Jeremy Cameron and Tom Hawkins. They have arguably the best backmen in the competition in Tom Stewart, and arguably the best young defender in the competition in Sam De Koning. There is just no reason why the Cats can't go back to back and win their 11th premiership in 2023. Which brings me to the team that I'm tipping, and I must emphasize this, the team I'm tipping to win the premiership is the one and only Fremantle Dockers. Now before you get your pitchforks and torches out, let me explain. Ever since 2017, I've been convincing myself that if there was ever going to be a year that Freo would break their duck and win their first premiership, it would be 2023. And plus, the history books reflect that as well. In 1993, the AFL announced the inclusion of a second Western Australian football club. In 2003, the Dockers played in their first ever final series. In 2013, the Dockers played in their first ever grand final. So now, in 2023, the Dockers should take the next step and win their first premiership in club history. Do I actually think the Dockers can win the premiership in 2023? Well, yes, there's no such thing as impossible in the world of footy. And with the Dockers constantly improving as the season arrives, the Dockers should be considered one of the top teams in the competition. But I wouldn't label the Dockers as a premiership contender now, but rather as a heavy finals favourite. If I'm being realistic, I think the team that is likelier to win the flag this year is Geelong, because like I said, they are just so far and beyond better than every other team in the competition. But put it this way, if I'm wrong, I've made myself look like an idiot, but if I'm right, I've made the most insane prediction of all time. So I'm going to stick with my heart and predict the Dockers to win the flag in 2023. And with that being said, that finishes off my 2023 AFL predictions. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, make sure to like, subscribe, and send this video around to your friends. And until the next video, I'll see you next time.